I'm delighted to introduce our next feature. Ashia Ajani is a sunshower, a glass bead, a carnivorous plant, an overripe nectarine, hailing from Denver, Colorado, Queen City of the Plains, and the unceded territory of the Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapaho people. Recipient of numerous fellowships and winner of a Best Small Fictions Award, Ajani is a lecturer in the Afro-American department at UC Berkeley and a climate resilient schools educator with Mycelium Youth Network. Their debut poetry collection, Heirloom, has just been issued from Write Bloody Publishing. Their book is available at writebloody.com. Please welcome Ashia Ajani.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor and a blessing to follow Tarita with some poems. I am always I feel like I learn so much, and I'm just like so enamored with the way that Tarita thinks about and challenges and pushes like an understanding of language even further. So thank you so much for that beautiful reading, and I'm very excited to follow. Um, so I'm mostly going to be reading from my debut collection. I might read a couple of new ones. But yeah, thank you for having me. A lot of my poems have to do with my grandma. They have to do with being like from Denver. They have to do with like migration. And so I think I would start kind of almost like with like an origin story one. And this one is called No Neutral Zones. At the playground, pretend is power. Children build new worlds from dirt and air. The alchemy of self learned through the unspoken hierarchy of the jungle gym. During the solstice, drought precluded imagination. Everyone so eager to cool off. Shoes became sticky with permissible color from melting paletas. So I, careless enough to sweat out a pressing curl to pursue pleasure elsewhere, lent my hues to this make-believe apparatus. In the dry grass, they wrote me out of their fantasy realms. At the edge of paradise, there are no Black folks. I could be a slave, but not a mermaid, a mule, but not a dragon. My hands so bruised, the darkness blends the edges of my history. We raced to the treetops, skin knees straddling heaven, while the king of conifers lectured me on the historical inaccuracies of my existence. Below, a polyester flower memorial stunk of piss and neglect, synthetic tributes to the sad-eyed boy ended by a stray bullet, a painful reminder that they too were encroaching on grief-stricken land. I cried as the nearby HOA kids hung from the branches, snapping bark from ancient trunks as their parents made plans to uproot. The trees near the baseball field weren't just overgrown wood gyms, but my cousins, though this relation also was too fantastic to comprehend. Meanwhile, the bars of the apartments across the street reminded my bones what it meant to be rusted. Once, a young boy pulled a box braid from my hair, joked that if he planted it, would a nigger sprout up from the soil. I laughed it off as I do most hurt, more worried about the unfurling of my grandmother's artistry by white hands, the same way an apathetic nurse smudges the letters on her birth certificate, effectively erasing her first honor, a name. The park, the neighborhood have both been remodeled. Like most, we had to sell to survive. Everything changed but the trees. The plastic roses in my grandmother's house are gathering dust now, forever trapped in bloom. Maybe it would be better to have planted something that at least knew death as release. The trees are losing their needles. They too are parched. That's the first poem. I would like to say thank you very much. My mom is still living in Denver and she is in attendance of this reading. So it's like really nice to have her here when I'm not nearby her. This next poem I'm going to read. Yeah, I think a lot about different, thank you, Shauna. I think a lot about different cultural interactions because I remember I'm a huge like history nerd. I love environmental history, I love Black history, and I love the intersection of the two. But I oftentimes think about how a lot of history is very much like white, Black, white, Latin, white, Asian, and like we don't really talk about the interactions between non-white folks and the ways that we collaborated and also had conflict. And so this is a poem thinking a little bit about Black and Indigenous relationality and trying to work through this concept of land and family. It's called Allotment. The Dawes Act of 1887 fragmented communal indigenous territory in Oklahoma into individual allotment plots. Water ran clay red as the crust of the earth dissolved into splintered versions of itself. The squatters who came before and after renamed land solid muscle. Big Ag lurked in the shadows, sowing genetically modified seeds of seizure. A former slave driver stood guard with a gun. Cultures carried on the fat backs of bees dispersed in silence. Meanwhile, someone tried to loot our piece of fallow. History unfolded like a moth-eaten quilt. The 5 tribes sought to ban previously enslaved Black citizens from owning territory. The Black face of the native is a ghost story no one wants to tell. The Black face of the native crumbled like overworked terrain, never to be seen again. My blood runs thick with fractured histories, wholly made up by those tribes of the West African coast rendered unfamiliar. American, some broken definition. I am built of fragmentation. What allotments compose my skin? Everywhere I go, I am a squatter. The land does not recognize my city slicker feet, all my kinship cast out to the Atlantic, swimming towards any bits of home this world can spare me. I turn my patchwork brown face towards the sun, try on ancestors like old clothing, unsure of which ones will fit. All right. I have been spending, it's spring, so I've been spending a lot of time in the garden. And so I want to read a couple of poems just about how awesome it is to be outside and be out in nature. This one is called Mint. Grandma played me her garden song during the shallow heat of springtime. She beat her palms against the soil, caressed the dirt-laced scrapes on my knees. Jewels of transcontinental sweat lined her bosom as she hacked up furtive weeds. Granny licked her peeling sugarcane lips. They parted, and forth sprung an aria of flowers. There were whole land masses dropping from her hands, breathing soul into fragrant coriander and parsley, ballads of San Juan and Mississippi, West Africa reconciled in Sunday dew-kissed grass. Look how the slender spines of lilac bow to the sunflower's sullen crowns. Just yards away, a squash blossom swan song wanes towards summer. She sat in the cool shade, mint leaves whistling, her back creaking like slave ships on salted ocean. She's found ways to harvest her own skin, ripe and deliberate, like wild bananas. All right. This next poem, I'm a Gemini, so I have a hard time making decisions. I never know which ones I want to read. This next poem, actually, this is the first time that I've really read this one out loud. It is, my title is in my poem, or excuse me, my book is entitled Heirloom. This poem is entitled Heirloom, and I think you'll understand why, I guess, the relationship between the title of the book and the title of this poem. Listen, I know that the empire has crooked teeth. They won't save me, but at the very least could cut through my gratitude cloth. They could tell me I look pretty once. I become undone with sorrow as I undress my best selves for the sake of self-preservation. The skirt woven from my great auntie's mirror. I held back coal-streaked tears while a man with a degree sought pity. Now sullied fabric wraps my wounds soot-stained. A ghost dollar rises from the ashes, becomes placeholder for peace. Grief swings from my branches, dropping threads of oil-stained lineage. Ghostly, I release string from mankind's cruel fibers. The fabric of me unravel the stillness that gives way to desire. Even in my quiet moments, I crave affirmation. Perennial fire shorn from progress. At dawn, I take the bus with other folks on their way to walk their own bed of coals, prepping their souls for the mean heat of a gray living. Maybe I dance, do a jive, something just to stay alive. One day I'll drape the world over my shoulder and run with it. Say I loved it, I washed it, I lived in it long enough to feel its sting. So those are all poems from Heirloom. You can order the book directly on my website. Definitely follow me on social media if you have them. But I'm going to be doing a few more gigs in and around the Bay Area. I will be at Bay Area Book Festival if anybody else will be at that. So I'm looking forward to doing, some more virtual and in person encounters. And I'm always down. Like, one of my favorite things to do that I don't get to do enough is if you have like an urban farm, or if you have like a garden, I love to come and I love to read and be among like the birds and kids and things like that. So I love doing things like that. This next poem is coming from my upcoming, not even upcoming, it's still very much a work in progress, manuscript. And it is called, if I can find it, it is called The Difference Between, where is it? The difference between a song and a siren is one of patience. And it's about, I love writing about different animals. So it's of course, it's about frogs. The difference between a song and a siren is one of patience. After the sun clocks out from its daily shift, the American bullfrog prepares for its nightly solo. What it does to air, man does to a baby grand, as it webs an unforgettable arpeggio across the starlit pond. My father tosses and turns in his sleep, too familiar with this summer concerto disrupting his nighttime respite. Another workday of squashing his song. This arrogant display reminds him of the melodies compelled to suffer, stuck in his own throat. Daddy believes in the bill or the bullet. He has no time for song unless salvation and the spliff can come with it. After flight, he labored for this silence, dodging persecution's din until all that remained was the drone of his own neurons firing. I am a descendant of retired noisemakers, of clamorous studies, bewitched by the kind of melody that emerges from fracture, like bullfrogs. I echo apocalypse, my vernacular instinctual. The American bullfrog was introduced to California in the 1850s to feed gold miners after they had eaten the native red-legged frogs to near extinction. Imagine a diversity of habitats, lakes, swamps, ponds, streams, ditches, reduced to a short-lived shallow pool until an insatiable mouth demands sacrifice. After is a modifier. I say I am an after, and history unfolds in the tight space behind my diaphragm. The wildest thing a body knows how to do is adapt. It builds muscle around trauma, grows wisdom from what lingers, acceptance over submission. After the bullfrog was let loose in the West, it outcompeted nearly every other species of frog in the region, and I wonder if luck is just a placeholder for birthright, if survival is strummed through the songs we sing in praise of our residue. No one asks bullfrogs if they miss their softness pre-rupture, if somewhere between memory and mourning they are calling each other homeward. Instead, we rebuke its deafening passion, resenting how it refuses to suffer in silence, soured by restless envy. My mother watches from the couch as her child plays the introduction to Lift Every Voice and Sing for the 2011th time. She says, play it again, and my fingers ache with obligation. This is an inheritance worth callousing for. This refrain, a blood impulse. Hunger led the bullfrog past eradication. Gospel feeds the soul one delicious note at a time. Look at what instinct does. I too stand 10 web toes down, my own body swelling with wild calls meant to dissipate among nature's symphony. After surviving, the bullfrog endures, lusts after life, despite all that has denied its glory. Even when we close our eyes, summertime reverberates with their gloating baritone. So I mentioned my grandma like a couple times, and you hear her like all throughout these poems. And I don't know, like publishing this book has just made me miss so many people in my life, and I feel like I'm calling them back into being, and reading this text. And so this last poem is called Chromatic. It is an honorific of my grandma, who was the dopest. So let's get it. Grandma was a mother, a hairdresser, a beautician, a stylist, an opera singer, a churchgoer, a God-fearing Christian, a cook, a pastry chef, a bad bitch, a freedom fighter, a conscientious objector, an ass whooper, a Southern belle, a great-grandmother, a wife, a widow, a scholar, a gardener, a loudmouth, a bad mamma jamma, a panther, a misogynist, a feminist, a giant, a misnomer, an Elton John fan, a soap opera enthusiast, a recipe hoarder, a librarian, the alpha and the omega, a PYT, a black glass house, a black supremacist, a mess, a negress, a shit talker, a bra burner, a seamstress, a gossip, a migrant, a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, an esthetician, a union. Look at how she glows, she glows, she glow. Look at how she keep glowing, glow. Grandma wants to move back to her true home in Wayne County. Besides, there aren't many black folks in Denver, and the ones who are here are a little too weird. They smell like patchouli and free love and all the things that could get us killed. The niggas in the north side whistle from lowriders and sport neck tattoos. The difference is the hands that pull the trigger will be the same color as the one that layer on the dirt, that will press the wounds into submission, that will clutch pearls and beat on the congregation pews and wipe tears and snot and fry fish in thick cast iron pans and break branches for switches and sing love and rage and love and rage. My mother says, do you see why I'm telling you this? Do you see how Detroit, no matter where I be, Detroit forever lives on in me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to hear Avacha's work. This has been such a lovely evening of poetry, and I appreciate the love.